Hey guys, welcome back to Airstream Beginner Basics Bootcamp. I'm your host Evan with Tacoma, and in this week's video we're going to be going over how do you register your Airstream. Stay tuned to the end of this video. We're going to be going over how much it costs to register our new Airstream in the new state that we just moved in, how much it was in another state that we lived in. All of this and more is going to be happening in this video, so stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it. Did you just spend your entire life savings on a brand new Airstream? Dropped $100,000? How do you even buy an Airstream? How often do we gotta service these things? Are you scared to death that you're about to break it? Are you wondering what's the difference between payload and tongue weight, and does it even matter? How do I get insurance on this? Do I need total replacement, or should I just go with Geico? Do we drain the black tank first or the gray tank first? How do you even dump this thing? What is a black tank flush? What are those little pods we put down the toilet, and do they even make a difference? Do we really need a hitch lock? There's like 10 different Facebook groups. Which one do I even join? What do we need to buy immediately just so we can go camping? If you found yourself answering yes to any of those questions, this new series is for you. Welcome to Airstream Beginner Basics Bootcamp, where I'm gonna go over all the tips and tricks that I've learned in the last year and a half of owning a brand new Airstream, and I'm gonna give it to you straight, because I've got the whole book of secrets right here, and I'm ready to divulge all of them to you. And with that being said, welcome to Airstream Beginner Basic Bootcamp. I'm your host, Evan, with Tacoma, and we hope to see you out in your Airstream real soon. Okay guys, let's move on to the next segment of this video, and that is how to register your Airstream. Again, this is another thing that really isn't discussed when you're buying the Airstream. I guess if you're lucky enough that you're buying from a dealer, the dealer usually is registering your Airstream for you, and that price is rolled into your total finance price or your total out the door price, which is great. So I'm gonna be giving you our experience of what the registration looked like for Texas, where we bought the Airstream, and then what it looked like once we moved to Washington, which was a very stark difference and also was very expensive. So let's get into that. I'll break down all of that for you. And if you're new here, we are first-time RVers. We have a 2023 Airstream Bootcamp 20X that we bought almost 3 years ago. We bought the Airstream in Texas. We have insured and registered in the state of Texas. We then moved to Washington, and then we had to get new insurance and then re-registered the Airstream in Washington to get Washington plates. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. We bought the Airstream from DFW Airstream in Texas in the year of 2022. This was a brand new 2023 Airstream Bootcamp 20X. It was about $70,000, and we were registering in the state of Texas because that's where we lived. And in the state of Texas, you're going to pay a sales tax. I believe the sales tax for the individual RV item was about 6%, 6 to 7%. I'm not sure. It's around there though, because I needed that information once we moved to Washington to prove that we actually paid some sales tax. Stay tuned to why that matters in just a couple more moments. But let's get back to Texas. So when you're registering the Airstream, they're going to do that on your behalf when you're buying the actual rig. It was all tied up into our lump sum out the door payment, the registration. I believe the registration was about $500 to $600 to the state of Texas. And of course we paid sales tax, and that was all that Texas was requiring, was just like the title and licensing fee, which I believe was less than $500. And what that did is Airstream and DFW filed that on our behalf, and then they sent us the tag to our home address. So it was a really simple, easy, relatively cheap process in terms of when you're buying a $70,000 vehicle. And again, like, these are legally required things, especially if you are going to get insurance for your Airstream, which you have to have in that state of Texas. You also have to register your Airstream. So like, these are not optional things that you can do. They are legally required to be able to actually take the Airstream on the road. You do have to have insurance, and you do have to have it registered with the state of Texas. So again, like, these aren't really optional things. These are things that you must do. I'm just sharing the cost with you so that you can expect that when you're going to have the out-the-door price of the Airstream. And I believe it took about a month for us to get our hard plates from Texas. When you drive off the dealer floor, you are given temporary plates, very similar to how when you're buying an automobile in the state of Texas. Same process. You get your paper plates, and then they're eventually converted to a hard plate. And the thing with trailers is that it is an annual renewal fee. And that's going to be the tab that you will place on the individual hard plate once you get it. And those tags are due every year. And I think in Texas, we were paying less than $100 for the individual, you know, your expiration tab. And yeah, so it was, you have your one-time fee, that's your registration and your title and licensing fee that's due at the dealership, which was less than $500. And then you have your annual tab that you'll put on your actual hard sticker, and that was less than $100 a year. So hopefully that gives you some information on what to expect in the state of Texas when you're registering your Airstream. We didn't have to go to the DMV or anything like that. Everything was done at the dealership, and that was, I guess, a great win for us because it wasn't something we also had to do. So keep that in mind if you're buying an Airstream in the state of Texas from a dealership. They're going to do that probably on your behalf. Okay, so let's get into what it looked like registering an Airstream that was already registered in one state and you're going to register it in another state. Again, this is going to be pretty drastically different, I would expect, state to state. However, Texas and Washington registrations are pretty drastically different to begin with, so maybe this is a good comparison for whatever state you live in versus another state you're going to move to. You will find a lot of this information online. However, it is so in the weeds that it's not going to give you any of the information you actually need. And so I'm hoping this video will provide clarity, especially for Washington, now that I know the process, because we had just recently went through it when we moved here. So let's get into the Washington process. Again, we had moved from Texas to the state of Washington. I believe you have 30 days to update all your titles, your licensings, your driver's license, all that information. Don't hold me to 30 days. I think it's around that timeline. We wanted to do it as soon as possible because we were actively use the Airstream, and in order to be legal on the road, you do need to have an updated tag, and you do need to have updated insurance. Also, do realize that in order to get insurance in the new state that you're living in, they will also require you to have a new tag for your Airstream. So you can't really do one without the other long term. You may be able to get away with it for about 6 months, but let me just paint you the example of what happens if you have a major collision, major accident with your Airstream in the state that you're living in, and you're trying to just skate by with being like, oh, well, we had active insurance in Texas. Like, they're gonna ask like where you're currently living now, and like it's never gonna work out in your favor, especially with insurance carriers like that are known to mitigate every single risk possible, and it will probably eventually be your fault. So like that just wasn't a risk that we were willing to take. We did see a lot of people on the Airstream forums saying like, oh, like, you know, you don't have to do that, like kind of like we were being overachievers. I would just say like whatever you're comfortable with, like risk-wise, we weren't really comfortable losing our $70,000 investment, you know, based off us just trying to cut a couple $100 or however much it was going to cost us. So let's get into the Washington process. Again, this was super convoluted when I was trying to find it on the state licensing page, the web pages. Everything here in the state of Washington is dealt with local licensing. So there's local businesses that are your local DMVs. The DMVs here there isn't like one main DMV in the state of Washington that you go to and do all your licensing, which was pretty backwards from the way we did it in Texas. So in the state of Washington, there are locally owned buildings or businesses, and they are handling your registration. And then there's separate for like to get your actual ID card. So just know that where you got your driver's license is not where you're going to register your car. You're going to need to look for an individual licensing agency for registration. So for that, it's usually by county. There's multiple, I mean, I think there was like over 10 in just our county that we live here in Washington. So do your research, find one that's good, and go from there. And just to note that these local businesses, the registration offices, are going to be your source of information. Again, you can go through and comb through all of your county codes with what to expect when trying to register your vehicle. You'll find it a lot for your automobile, but for a RV, it was getting a little tricky with how they were deciphering an RV from a travel trailer. So again, for Airstream specific, it was just too in the weeds, couldn't find what I needed. So again, hopefully this video will help with that. So in the journey of getting registration for the Airstream, let's talk about some main things. Where you're gonna need to go to do it, how much money it's going to cost you, and why is it that much money? And then let's talk about like some annual fees, the tabs and whatnot. So let's get into that. So again, the place that you're going to go to register your Airstream in the state of Washington is going to be one of the local registration offices for registration. So for us, it was in our county specific. We chose one, and we chose it based off of some friends recommended that we go here because the lines were, you know, less long, like local mom and pop type registration offices, which really is great because they're giving you like the knowledge that you need and not just all the backlash of like government regulations and codes. So you're gonna find that on Google. Just type in your local registration office in your given county. I'm sure 10 plus will come up. Choose the one with the best reviews, give them a call, tell them your current situation, and go from there. So now let's talk about what you're going to need to register your Airstream in the state of Washington. You're going to need a copy of your title for your Airstream travel trailer. If your travel trailer is financed, for example, financed in the state of Texas, you're going to need a copy of the official title, or you're going to need an electronic copy that your bank is currently holding. This process took over, I believe, 6 weeks for them to send a copy of the electronic Texas title from their electronic Texas title system to send to the county registration office here in Washington. 6 weeks total, okay? Which seems insane to me. And also, if you're familiar with Texas registration, you don't hold the title in your possession until the loan is paid off. We financed our Airstream, so we did not have the title in possession. But the way that it worked for us is that our bank was able to send the title to the registration office via email, and that's how they ended up getting it. But it did take 6 weeks, and you can try to call your bank yourself and tell them, you know, speak to the customer service agent, tell them that you just moved. They'll ask you what state, an email address, a fax address. It just was a really bad process that took, I would say, at least 5 phone calls from me to just follow up with, did you receive the information? Did you not? And it was just a constant, like, the bank, me, the middleman, and then the registration office and the bank, they would not connect directly at all. The only way that they would connect was via fax. And in the year of 2025, like, I just think there should be a simpler process. Like, but they would not connect with each other. It was always like bounced between me, them, and it was just crazy. Eventually, though, they did get what they needed. Just note that it took 6 weeks in order to send a title that was held by my bank to send to the new office in Washington, and you will need to have the title or they won't register the vehicle for you. So once that process is all cleared, this office actually called me and said, hey, we've now got the title, like, come in with your other documents. What are the other documents? We had to have proof of our like purchase agreement when we bought it from DFW Airstream. You didn't have to have that, but if you don't have it, you are showing the state of Washington that you did not pay sales tax on that Airstream. And this was where I got the most confused and where I could not find solid answers. So if you learn anything in this video and you live in the state of Washington, this is going to be very helpful, and this is the truth, and this is I guess the law. You have your title, you bring your purchase agreement, how much you paid for your Airstream in the state that you bought it in. Then you need proof of insurance. So we had to have the new insurance stating that it was you know, our new policy in Washington. The one in Texas would not have worked. That's why you need to have an updated insurance policy. So we had they already had the title that was transferred from our bank. We brought the purchase agreement from DFW Airstream. Thank God we kept that because you will need it. And then you need to have the insurance for your new policy. So the number one question I had was, how much is this going to cost me to register the Airstream in the state of Washington? Because we were already kind of getting the rumor mill of like, oh, it's gonna be a lot of money. And I knew it would be different from Texas, because in Texas, the sales tax is 6%. In the state of Washington, it will depend on what county you're in, but This is what I learned from the registration process. The Airstream is considered a luxury item in the state of Washington, or at least in the county that we registered it in. And with that being said, the sales tax for a luxury item in this group that the Airstream falls in was over 10% tax, okay? So when you're registering a new Airstream, we're just sticking to travel trailers here, the registration office is going to assess the value. I don't know what they use to determine the value of the Airstream. However, with this being, I don't know if there was a year cap, but with this being kind of a brand new Airstream, they took what it was worth on our purchase price agreement, which was $70,000. So for example, they assessed that the value was $70,000 and you pay what is called an excise tax. Excise tax basically is that's the tax difference between the state that you bought it in and now the state that you're registering it in. And in the state of Washington, that is the law. You have to pay it in order to get tags. Got a lot of varying opinions on this, and maybe some ways that you could go about escaping it. I don't know how you would escape it. Again, if you need insurance, you want to drive it legally, you will have to have it registered in the state of Washington or risk, driving the vehicle illegally and not having insurance, which both was not in our interest of doing. So at the registration office, they're going to value your travel trailer. With this being a brand new travel trailer, an Airstream, they took the purchase price agreement, which was $70,000. They then said, you will now pay the remaining tax, registering in the state of Washington. State of Washington is pretty unique because we are bordering the state of Oregon, where there is no sales tax. So I think they might have caught on to people just driving a couple hours down the freeway, buying these luxury items, coming back and trying to register them in the state of Washington. State of Washington said, no, you're now going to pay tax you didn't pay tax in Oregon, you're now going to pay tax in Washington. There's no way around this. If there is, please let us know in the comments. I'm at the registration office. I now have my title. I now have the proof of insurance, and we have the tax that we paid in Texas. So when we bought the Airstream, it was about $70,000. We paid 6% sales tax in the state of Texas, which I think was like right around $6,000 or less. The day that we are trying to get the plates in Texas, we then have to pay the remaining tax in the state of Washington. So again, you're not paying, I think a common argument is like, oh, I have to pay tax again. You're paying the remaining tax. So I'm not having to pay the Texas tax that I already paid on the Airstream. They're deducting the Texas tax from our total new Washington tax. So again, if you can just kind of picture this bill of sale, bill of receipt, whatever you want to call it. $70,000 was the appraisal here in Washington. There wasn't a depreciation because the Airstream was brand new, so it's still appraising for $70,000, which you could argue has differed, but I don't know how you're going to win with a local registration office. They then say you paid 6% sales tax in the state of Texas. Let's say that was $6,000. You will now pay the remaining tax here in Washington. In my county, it was over 10% because they consider a Airstream a luxury item, and that tax was about $3,000 additional. I walked out of the registration office. I was cutting them a check for $3,000 in order to get those plates. Ooh, and one more thing to note. When you're at the registration office, you can use the credit card. However, they're going to charge you a 3 to 4% fee. And when you're paying about $3,000, you're not going to want to tack on an extra 3% fee. So you can either use a debit card or a check. However, if you do use a debit card, they do charge you, I think it was a one-time fee of $4. So things to note if you're going to register and it's going to be a lot of money, maybe bring a personal check because it will be the cheapest option. So again, just to wrap up registration, what that looked like. Again, you're going to pay the remaining tax here in the state of Washington of what you didn't pay in the state of Texas. So I've given you the example. Texas was 6%. Washington has a 10% additional luxury item tax on an Airstream. It was very funny when the woman at the local registration office was kind of like chuckling, like, "Oh, this is gonna be a bad one," and yeah, I mean, I really wasn't expecting to pay $3,000 additional to register the Airstream here, but I guess that is the that's the beauty of living in Washington, living in another state that you want to live in. So there just was no way around it. And from what I understand is that, you know, that was like the one-time registration fee in order to get our plates, that getting the tabs on our Airstream would probably be less than $100 a year. So we haven't had a full year here with registration yet on the Airstream. So stay tuned. I'll, you know, eventually go over that in another video. But yeah, just note that it's going to be a heavy cost to register your Airstream here in the state of Washington. You're going to pay the remaining tax. Washington is going to get their fair share of that Airstream purchase price. But very, very important to know that if you do not have your bill of sale or your receipt proving that you paid the state tax wherever you bought your Airstream, you will repay it in the state of Washington. So for example, if I couldn't have proved that I paid the 6% sales tax in Texas, they would have charged me the full 10 to 12% excise tax here in the state of Washington. So please, please, please keep a hold of those, you know, your final paperwork from that dealership, because it saved us $6,000, which is great. So just to wrap everything up here, guys, I hope you found this video informative. Again, it was something that wasn't available when I was registering the Airstream last year. Did a lot of research in the state of Washington, and ultimately just had to go through the experience. So luckily I took notes, I collected all that, and now I'm just here to share the journey with you to hopefully make your registration process a little easier. Again, we covered what the process looked like to register the Airstream out of state. You know, again, that's gonna look different for whatever state you're in, but for example, Texas to Washington, I hope this video was useful. Stay tuned, I have a couple new Airstream Beginner Basic Bootcamp episodes coming out. And we hope to see you in the comments. If you need anything, please let us know. We're always happy to help. Stay tuned.